The good news is that a Trump-appointed judge has put a stop to one of his illegal deportation strategies that he's been using to send Venezuelan men to prisons in El Salvador. I'm Allie 202, and welcome back to the series where we talk about a piece of good news, bad news, and something positive you can do for the world today. During a Trump presidency, the news is often so overwhelming that it mentally shuts us down, and my goal with this series is to keep you informed without absolutely derailing your nervous system. You'll be up to date on one piece of bad news, but the good news will retain your faith in humanity, and the action item at the end of the video will make you feel like you can be productive and involved in preventing a descent to fascism. Today's three stories are as follows. Number one, a federal judge in South Texas has ruled that Trump cannot use the Alien Enemies Act, which by the way has not been used by a president since World War II, to deport Venezuelans to prisons in El Salvador. Number two, our bad news is that there were multiple arrests made at UCLA where pro-Palestine protesters intended to watch a documentary about the former year's encampments but were shut down by administration and police in riot gear. And number three, the what can you do is going to be about a group of queer refugees from Uganda who I've been working with for a couple years now, and I'll tell you more about their stories at the end of the video. Let's hop right in. The good news is that another federal judge has blocked Trump's illegal strategies for deportations, and this judge was appointed by Trump during his last term. Back in March, the White House invoked something called the Alien Enemies Act. This is the formal White House webpage that I'm going to be referring to. Now, the Alien Enemies Act is a law that the president is able to invoke if we are at wartime or invasion, which notably we are not. The Trump administration has been trying to make the claim that we are under invasion by a Venezuelan gang called Tren de Aragua, specifically at the direction of the government of Venezuela. This is a bold claim and one that nobody has really expected would hold up in court. But remember, the courts in this country sometimes move slowly, and so the Trump administration has already used the Alien Enemies Act to remove more than 130 immigrants to El Salvador, many of whom had been detained in South Texas where this ruling was just made. A quick side note, that deportation in March was probably one you heard about because there was actually a court order to turn the planes around midair. A federal judge in DC had said, hey, you can't use wartime powers to immediately deport people, you need to turn around any planes that are currently in transit. And of course, the Trump administration argued that the court order came too late to stop the deportations as planes were already outside of the US. As such, there's been a lot of disagreement and debate about whether the Trump administration disobeyed a court order here in allowing the planes to touch down in El Salvador. For what it's worth, this was also the time that President Bukele of El Salvador tweeted in response to a headline about how these flights were ordered to turn around midair. Oopsie, too late. And can't forget the laughing emoji. But anyways, back to the most recent court case, where the judge writes that Trump's use of this act last month was unlawful and that it exceeded the scope of the statute and is contrary to the plain, ordinary meaning of the statute's terms. In other words, hey, this should have been obvious, but you are not allowed to do that. This ruling applies to a district in South Texas. If the Trump administration appeals the decision, it would go to the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, considered one of the country's most conservative courts. The case could eventually be headed to the U.S. Supreme Court as well. While the idea of this going to one of the country's most conservative courts is not ideal, do remember that it was a Trump-appointed judge that just issued this ruling this week. And like I said, a lot of people weren't expecting this to hold up in court, because regardless of your political leaning, we are not at wartime and we are not under invasion. This ruling is an awesome first step to getting in the way of some of Trump's illegal deportation strategies. As with anything that goes through our court system, there's the opportunity for it to be appealed multiple times, potentially turned over. This could end up being the final ruling on the matter, or it could go all the way up to the Supreme Court. The thing to remember right now is that all of these court battles are going to be prolonged, and so it's really important to remind ourselves of the victories we have as we accomplish them, both to remind ourselves that we still have collective power as the public, and to remind our nation's judges that they have the backing of public support, because the Trump administration has signaled interest in threatening and arresting judges who make rulings that they don't like, and it's just really important that judges in this country feel safe right now to oppose the Trump administration. So the outcome of this case is really, really good news. Switching gears to the bad news story for this episode, we're going to talk about the arrests that were made on UCLA's campus at what was intended to be a peaceful screening of a documentary about last year's encampments. Now, I have a clip that I'm going to play in a bit so that you can watch what happened for yourself, but first I'm going to set the scene for you. It has been one calendar year since the Zionist attack on the UCLA encampment, where agitators threw fireworks and scooters into the encampment and police did not intervene for over 3 hours. This was all over the news. Hopefully it rings a bell. To commemorate 1 year, SJP, which stands for Students for Justice in Palestine, which is a common campus organization across the country, planned to host a documentary screening about the encampments to honor 1 year since the attack. The organization Students for Justice in Palestine has been suspended at UCLA. That's critical context here. SJP was suspended at multiple universities. This was just a common tactic for shutting down the encampments. So the administration is really going to lean on that line of argument when they're defending what happened this week. Okay, so at around 7:30 p.m., around 200 protesters began gathering at Wilson Plaza. This is not where the event was originally intended to be held. It was going to be taking place at Dixon Plaza, according to a post on its Instagram account. However, However, UCPD, which is the University of California Police Department, announced the closure of the area Wednesday afternoon, blocking all entrances off with metal barriers following the arrest of a pro-Palestine protester around 2:30 p.m. That protester was not UCLA affiliated and was arrested for battery after slapping a security officer. In turn, SJP was no longer able to host their event at Dixon Plaza as they had intended. So they moved it right to Wilson Plaza. People get there around 7:30 p.m. We're all on the same page? Okay, so they go to set up the screening, and then a representative from Student Affairs tells protesters that visuals are not allowed in the area. Okay, so they try to move again. They walk to Bruin Plaza to present the documentary instead. They set up a white sheet and a projector next to the Bruin Bear. Around 8:05 p.m., this time a police officer tells an SJP representative that they could also not show the film in that area. About 20 minutes later, around 30 UCPD officers wearing riot gear and armed with less than lethal weapons lined up behind the stage in Bruin Plaza. The officers surrounded the protesters, who walked towards Pauley Pavilion. Protesters walked up Bruin Walk to Deneve Plaza, where they chanted Free Free Palestine and set up the screen. Here they are for like the third time trying to have their screening, right? It was at around 9 p.m. when 30 PD officers in riot gear ran into a crowd of around 150 pro-Palestine protesters who briefly dispersed from the area. And then 3 police officers also drove motorcycles into the center of the plaza. Officers detained 2 protesters and confiscated the screening equipment. And of course, UCLA in its statement said that this was in accordance with the university's time, place, and manner policies, which ban the use of amplified sound during marches unless approved beforehand. The reality of this situation is that the people who escalated were the cops. SJP's intent was to have a peaceful gathering, and UCLA and other universities routinely cite these like time, place, and manner reasons for having had to shut an event down. But realistically, the university does not send cops in riot gear to shut down other events on campus. Like, this is often a strategy that we've seen reserved for SJP events across the country and encampments specifically, as they have grown in popularity and universities have routinely tried to shut them down. Here's the footage of the event that's been posted by Students for Justice in Palestine at UCLA on their Instagram. I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward to when the motorcycles arrived. And all this over a movie screening. Okay, we've covered the 2 news sections of today's video. Now we're going to talk about something positive that you can do for the world right now. And I'm specifically going to talk about something called LGBT Uganda that if you've been following me for a little bit now, you are probably already familiar with. But for those of you who are new here, let me catch you up to speed. I'm actually getting messages from them right now as we speak. A couple years ago, Uganda's parliament passed a bill that has been nicknamed the Kill the Gays bill. Now, this bill did not come about in a vacuum. Obviously, we deal with homophobia and transphobia across the globe, but as an American, it feels important to me to name that there has been a specifically long and dark history of Western Christian missionaries who basically give up on their alt-right projects in the United States, deciding that they're going to take their millions of dollars and decades of free time to run these programs in a few African nations that aim to criminalize homosexuality and being trans. It's really disgusting, and I don't have the time to delve into all of that history just in this video, so I'm gonna keep it short for now, but comment if you're interested in me making like a longer explainer video about the really creepy things that some of these churches have done. Anyways, after this bill was passed, I was put in touch with a group of queer Ugandans who had in Kampala, the capital of Uganda, been running a food and shelter program essentially for people who were not safe with their families or on the streets or wherever they had been. A lot of them were relying on Emma, who is the one who's texting me right now, who is an amazing community leader, and I mean, honestly, one of the most impressive people that I have ever come in contact with. There are a ton of videos on my page documenting the process of busing people across the Ugandan border into a Kenyan refugee camp, bailing Emma out of prison very last minute when she was arrested for helping these queer people bus out of Uganda. And I will like link some of those videos and cards up here so that you can go back and watch them if you want to get more of a full picture. But the update that you all have been waiting for right now is that Emma has officially immigrated to Canada, and she is trying to support the group now from her safer home abroad. I have paid her rent for a few months now, and that is totally fine by me, and I'm going to start fundraising for her rent soon, but for right now, she really wants to prioritize fundraising for the folks who are back in Africa, in Uganda, but also in a couple other nations that she's fundraising for. This is what the new GoFundMe looks like, and I'm going to link it in the description below. It's made by Emma, a former queer refugee representative from Africa living in Canada now, and as a representative, I continued receiving so many requests for help ever since I reached Canada, and now I'm devoted to the mission of trying to improve the lives of LGBTQ members of the community in Africa. It would mean the world to me and to Emma if you give anything you can to this fundraiser, and if you can't, that's totally fine, but if you're willing to share it to friends and family, that would be absolutely amazing. You can also watch the live stream that I did with Emma and other refugees who were living in the refugee camp in Kakuma, Kenya. I'm going to link that video here as well, hopefully putting a card right up on the screen here. I'm going to have more videos and updates coming out about Emma and her community back home, but in the meantime, I just really wanted to include this as an action item for one of my long videos for the first time, because I've made so many short videos about their process and their fundraising, and it felt only right to include this in one of the first videos of this new series. Comment if you would like me to include updates about this group in future videos of this series. Okay, I'm just gonna cut myself off now because I think I've yapped for long enough. As always, I really hope that this series is helping you feel involved and helpful and also like not out of your mind stressed, even though it totally makes sense to feel out of your mind stressed right now. But the more that we can do to ground ourselves and remind ourselves of the hopeful things and the good news and the ways that we can be productive and give back to our communities, the better we will fare in taking down the Trump administration's attempt to just derail all of the more positive things that we have about this country. I love you so much. I hope you stay safe and stay well. I believe that I'm going to be posting these videos every other day, so keep an eye out for them. Remember to turn your post notifications on so that you see when these long videos come out, and that is the end. Goodbye.